Namaskar and thank you for coming on a Sunday. Today marks the last of the tranches of announcement subsequent to Prime Minister's address to the nation. In fact, I'd like to start by quoting some words of Prime Minister's speech that day, because what I'm planning to say today is very much pegged to that aspect of his speech. And I quote, "As a nation today, we stand at a very crucial juncture." He spoke in Hindi and a version of it in English has been translated. I'm using that. As a nation, we stand at a very crucial juncture. Such a big disaster is a signal for India. It has brought a message and an opportunity. Unquote. He also used the expression crisis and an opportunity. That again leads to me to refer to his expression that we need now to build an Atmanirbhar Bharat. So, laying the foundation for what I want to say today, a little again quote from the Prime Minister. Quote, "In order to prove the resolve of a self-reliant India, land, labor, liquidity and laws all have been emphasized in this package." So, a message from the pandemic, the challenges that it throws, the crisis and the challenge, and also looking at a self-reliant Bharat, an India which is going to be strong enough to meet the global challenges, but primarily looking at land, labor, liquidity and laws to bring that strength back to India and build a Atmanirbhar India. So, in the last 4 days of announcements, particularly the last 2 days, have had several reforms addressing the land, labor, liquidity and the laws. Today, we will be continuing in that series. PM also had said, "Jaan hai to jahan hai." Soon after announcing the lockdown, we had come with a PM Garib Kalyan package in order to immediately reach out to those who wanted food, who need food. We were not doing a favor to them, it was our duty. So we quickly went in to give next 3 months the requirement of grains as per the PDS, plus free grains also, because we didn't want them to scout for money to go and search for grains. Pulses were also given for 3 months in advance. And here, I would want to say a word in appreciation of the efforts that the Food Corporation of India, NAFED and the state governments all together put in, facing the logistics challenge that this posed, upfront giving all the grains and the pulses as promised to everybody who needed it as per the cards in every nook and corner of the country. It was a logistic challenge. Although the FCI and the NAFED and the state governments are quite adept at doing it, but all at one go upfront was a major issue because huge quantities had to go. But notwithstanding the lockdown, I again want to say the FCI, the NAFED and the state governments all came into the picture, made sure that the quantity of grains were lifted and gave them, the workers who couldn't travel back, who actually could procure the grains from their cards. But there were also workers who couldn't go back to their homes, who stayed in the camps, because PM had very clearly said early, in one of his early messages, stay where you are. And state governments ensured that they prepared meal, NGOs participated in this, charitable organizations also made sure that these workers who are not able to go back home are attended to. Many employers also kept their workers in their own premises and gave them food and place to be. The PM Garib Kalyan used the technology available and therefore was able to do direct benefit transfer of cash for the various categories. I just want to quote some of these numbers now before I begin today's issue, because of the size of what is shown in these figures. The number of people to whom directly to their accounts money could reach because technology, direct benefit transfer technology, was in time adopted and implemented with such missionary zeal over the last 4 years. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been possible at all. PM Kisan beneficiaries as of 16th May, I'm strictly talking about the announcements and their impact. One-time transfer of 2,000 rupees each has reached 8.19 crore farmers, and that amount is about 16,394 crores. NSAP beneficiary, the old age and others, first installment 2.812 crores of people, 1,405 crores of rupees in the first installment, again 1,402 in the second installment. The target was to give away 3,000 crores, and that's almost nearly achieved. Jan Dhan account holding women under the PM Garib Kalyan were credited into 20 crore people's accounts, and that amounts to 10,025 crores of rupees. The building and construction workers received their financial support amounting to 3,950.35 crores, and their number, the building and construction workers number, is 2.20 crores. Imagine each one of these numbers and their implication in terms of size. And all of them received the money directly into their accounts purely because DBT was possible. 6.81 Ujjwala Yojana cylinders have reached the beneficiaries, and they were free cylinders because we had promised up to 3 cylinders in those 3 months. To over 12 lakhs of EPFO members have benefited by the online withdrawal of non-refundable advance, and that amounts to 3,660 crores. So I can further go with the numbers, but just to highlight what the technology-driven DBT has given us at a time of emergency, a pandemic. And that is something which I want to draw your attention to. We immediately responded by giving food grains, cooking gas, cash where it was required, and immediately, that is. And most of them were front-loaded also. When the lockdown got extended, free grains and dal was also given for a further 2 months more. Free grains and dal was also given for 2 months more. And when it was really possible to have the workers go from the camps that they were in to their respective villages, trains were allowed, and state governments were requested to request for trains from the various stations that they wanted, so that once they brought the workers into that area to that station, from that station they could be taken to their respective states. The cost of this travel, 85% of it was borne by the central government. The rest is 15% was with the state governments, 85% was borne by the central government. During the travel in the train, food was also given to the workers. So why am I elaborating all this? Just because, remember, jaan hai to jahan hai. So immediately, to make sure that the lives are given the first priority and attention, we ensured that this was extended. But now, it is important also to provide every support when in a changed post-COVID era, livelihoods will also have to come into their fullest play. So when the lockdown gets lifted, and when businesses, after facing severe stressful conditions of business, will be coming back to say, can I start my work back again? Can I get my workers back? Or do I have the money to buy the raw materials? Is it enough for me to pay the wages which is due? All kinds of considerations are going to come up, and many of them may also wonder if they were reaching a stage of bankruptcy. So all this has been kept in mind when we are addressing the issues of land, labor, liquidity and the laws. So today, and like the days earlier, the 4 days earlier, our attempt is to make sure that, like the way we gave in PM Garib Kalyan, we attend to Jan, but also make sure that environment is all right now for everybody to start protecting their work, their businesses, their homes and everything else. Today, I have 7 such steps to tell you, and the order in which I am saying them are: the first one is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Second is on health, and both in rural and urban, and together with it I put an during the COVID period, education related steps that have been taken. So that's the second. Third is on businesses and COVID. Fourth is on decriminalization of the Companies Act. Fifth is talking about ease of doing business and related matters. Sixth is on public sector enterprises related matters and the policy thereof. Seventh, state governments and resources related to state governments. So these are the steps which we are taking, 7 of them under these headings. And the last, of course, I will be coming to tell you about the 20 lakhs. So before I start on today's reforms and enabling measures, I would like to show what we have done in the last 2 months, particularly as regards containment of coronavirus, and also the way in which at that time businesses don't get affected by the compliance burden, and also make sure that school-going children do have some technological support in conducting their classes, in having their classes conducted. So if we can start off with the slides. The health-related steps that have been taken are shown in this slide. 15,000 crores was declared by the Prime Minister as released, and from that 4,113 crores have been released to the states. Essential items of 3,750 crores were bought. Testing labs and kits were also brought in. Insurance cover, which is the most important thing there, insurance cover of 50 lakhs per person for health professionals under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana was announced. Also making sure that telemedicine comes into play. There was a rollout of e-Sanjeevani, which is a tele-consultation service, and capacity building exercises have also been taken up through virtual learning modules. Then protection of health care workers required an amendment in the Epidemic Diseases Act, which is a fairly an old act, but amendments have been made. And one thing which the Prime Minister mentioned during his speech, which is worth recollecting, that this challenge gave us an opportunity to prove to the world that we can ramp up production of protection equipments. Today, we have more than 300 domestic manufacturers of PPE, and early when this whole epidemic came into existence and all of us really got ourselves to take preventive steps, there were not even one producer of PPE. Already we have supplied about 51 lakhs of PPEs, 87 lakhs of N95 masks, and also 11.08 crores of hydroxychloroquine tablets. So that is as regards the health related matters. Ease of doing business, quite a few things have happened, but because I'm going to elaborate it as part of my package, I will not attend to it now. You can go to the next slide. This also is something which we've been doing during the COVID time, just to make sure that activities are initiated as regards ease of doing business. I'll again come back to it when I'm getting in to talk about the package. The next slide. This is important because during the COVID, compliance burden was going to be a matter of concern, and people had said, even if we had violated one or two, or because we couldn't attend to office, or because my necessary staff were not coming who were doing my compliance job, will action be taken against us. So today we have been joined by Secretary Corporate Affairs also. Timely action was taken to reduce the compliance burden under various provisions of the Companies Act. As well as that, companies could conduct, this is a very important technological advantage which we have used, like the DBT. We have said companies could conduct their board meetings, their EGMs and AGMs virtually using technology through video conferences, and the latest order pertains to the fact that even rights issues can be done leveraging the strength of Digital India. This is a major step forward in corporate governance. So this is something which, because of the pandemic, the Corporate Affairs Ministry has been very proactive to engage with the companies and understand how best their problems could be sorted out. So that was a measure taken in such a context. Other than that, of course, 44% recovery has been achieved during that time since 2016 inception of IBC. The other details I can give you a bit later, but I think during the COVID, we made sure that industries don't suffer. The third one about what we've done during the first 2 months during the COVID crisis is a bit of using technology for education. Online education has been taken up in a big way. Schools are now using a lot of technology, but Swayam Prabha, which is a direct telecast mode that they have, direct to home channels have been used. 3 channels are already earmarked for school education. Now, another 12 channels are to be added to this. I am sure in schools in the rural areas also, this will be of great help, where schools can bring in technology to children, because irrespective of rural or urban, children love technology and they adapt very quickly to it. So the education, HRD, the education department, the human resource department has made the best of this time to provide curriculum through technologically active media. So provision has been made for telecast of live interactive sessions so that teachers and students can watch what is going on, and these channels bring in experts from home through Skype. Also, they have tied up with private DTH operators like Tata Sky and Airtel to air educational video content. And this, of course, enhances the learning interest of children. So the states of India are coordinating to share airtime. 4 hours is given every day. States of India are also using it, and Swayamprabha channels therefore will be telecasting education related contents. 200 new textbooks are being added to E-Pathshala. We move to the first of the 7. The budget estimate for Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, was 61,000 crores. We know, and I yesterday referred to it, even day before we spoke about it, a lot of workers are going back to their villages, and we've made provision so that they can also join in if they want to enroll in Manrega. So government will now allocate an additional 40,000 crores. This way will ensure that during the monsoon season, and since many of them have gone back to their villages, and if they enroll, they will get the jobs. So 40,000 crore of rupees is additionally given over and above the BE. We now go to the second, which is ramping up the health infrastructure. After all, as I said, if there was this crisis, if there was this challenge, we also should see the opportunity and be ready to face any future emergency situation that may arise. Health reforms and initiatives have been put in place. Public expenditure on health will be certainly increased. Investments at the grassroots level will be ramped up for health and wellness centers, both in the rural and urban areas. Remember that we had been talking about wellness centers so that they can be in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and particularly giving focus in aspirational districts. We also spoke about the viability gap funding for the social infrastructure only yesterday. So we will be ramping up all the wellness centers and health infrastructure. All districts will have an infectious diseases block in their hospitals. All districts. Then lab, in Delhi we have a lot of path labs moving around and which facilitates people's lives. Lab networks in rural areas are not adequate. So public health labs will be set up at all block levels, not just in district, but block levels we will have public health labs. So I recall Prime Minister did say this pandemic is a challenge. This or any pandemic, if at all it poses a challenge, we need to be ready, Atma Nirbhar, in hospitals, at the block and at the district levels. So there is a lot of emphasis being now given for setting up hospitals and also labs, diagnostic labs and testing labs, both with private and public funded opportunities. Along with health, as my second point, Manrega was the first, now this one is the second, health and education. The next slide shows you what efforts have been made as a result of learning from the pandemic experience. PM E-Vidya program for multimode access to digital online education will be launched immediately, and this will consist of Diksha, which gives a one nation, one digital platform facility, and this is for school education. One earmarked TV channel for each class from class 1 to 12. One earmarked TV channel per class, one channel will also be part of this. Then there will be extensive use of radio, community radio and podcasts. So technology in a big way into education. Extensive use will be made of radio also. Special e-content for visually and hearing impaired children. This is going to be one of the very big step forward, and I personally feel very touched by the HRD's attempt to ensure that Divyang children also get equal access to good quality education. So special e-content for visually and hearing impaired children, and the top 100 universities will be permitted and will be automatically allowed to start online courses, by 30th May 2020. I remember speaking about this particular aspect during the budget also. Then of course, one very important thing, there are two other points, but I will just briefly refer to Mano Darpan. I think this is a great initiative, considering that during this lockdown period also, many students required support, psychological support, because lockdown was new to them. There was this fear, don't go anywhere, don't touch anybody, don't speak to anybody, don't take anything from anybody else. Children were definitely stressed because of this, and an initiative for psychological support of students, teachers and families, the larger thing being for mental health and emotional well-being, is being launched immediately. There are other two things, but for want of time, I would rather briefly touch this and get to the next. We move to the third of the 7 steps that we're talking about. This is about IBC related matters, where many businesses have got severely affected, particularly during this lockdown and also the COVID pandemic. Debts related to COVID shall be excluded from default under the IBC. This is a change which we are going to make, that any debt which is incurred or indebted situation that comes up for companies because of coronavirus, they shall not be included in the category of default. Then no fresh insolvency procedures or proceedings will be initiated up to 1 year. At the moment, I think the MCA has extended it to 6 months. We intend extending it even by another 6 months, because after all, when the lockdown gets lifted immediately, you're not sure how much of business will get restored. So no fresh insolvency proceedings will be initiated up to 1 year. For MSMEs, which is again an important step, for MSMEs, a special insolvency framework will be notified under section 240A of the IBC. One other thing which will benefit the MSMEs is the minimum threshold to initiate insolvency proceedings is now raised to 1 crore from 1 lakh, which will therefore insulate the MSMEs. This is a major step forward, and in all probability we will be going through an ordinance, am I right, Secretary? An ordinance to achieve this goal immediately. Of course, we'll go back to the Parliament once the Parliament commences to have it passed as an act. The next is related matter, but related specifically to the Companies Acts and the related defaults. That's the next slide. Just prior to the lockdown, we had announced that we shall extend all the compliance deadlines. This form has to be filled up by this deadline, you have to do this compliance by so and so deadline. All of them were extended, and so that procedural defaults don't take place. technical or procedural defaults was one thing which people were afraid of if we hadn't extended the compliance date. So now what we are trying to do is decriminalize most of the sections in Companies Act where you have violations which are technical and procedural nature. So we want to decriminalize all of them. Then compoundable offences where there are, they can now be tried under internal adjudicating mechanism, and this way one, it becomes simpler, it can be sorted out at the local internal adjudicating mechanism route rather than go to the courts. This will help us decongest the courts. The declogging is absolutely important for the criminal courts and for the NCLT. So amendments will now enable us to achieve all this. An ordinance again will have to be brought in for this. 7 compoundable offences altogether will be dropped and 5 will be dealt with under alternative framework. There was a thing introduced in the Parliament, but then we didn't even have the time to take it up. But this has 1 or 2 other additional features with which we will now come up with an ordinance so that immediately it can benefit companies. The next one also relates to the corporate affairs. In order to make it easier for companies, there are several features, but I'll highlight only 2 of them. The rest will be shared to you. First is, this will help companies to directly list their securities in foreign jurisdictions. So now companies can list their securities directly in foreign jurisdictions. So this is one big step forward for Indian companies. And then second, listings of non-convertible debentures on stock exchange will not be regarded as those companies as listed companies. So if companies were to just put their non-convertible debentures in the stock exchange, it doesn't mean that they become listed companies. So these are 2 steps, but of course there will be more which will be shared to you. You will be able to get the further details on it. For want of time, I don't want to spend more time on it. The next one relates to a major step in that we would like to announce a public sector enterprise policy. An Atmanirbhar Bharat needs a coherent policy. All sectors will be open to private sectors also. Public sector enterprises will continue to play an important role in defined areas. We need a coherent policy because sometimes you opened up some sectors in piecemeal. This sector is open but not that. That sector has always been with public sector, it shall be with public sector. It's never available for others. So we are coming up with a coherent policy wherein private sector will be allowed to participate in every sector available, but of course public sector will continue, and they will continue to play a very critical role. And public sector, when I say public sector, I mean public sector enterprises. Public sector enterprises will continue to play a very important role, and we shall now define the areas in which their presence will be impactfully felt. So the Government of India will announce a new policy which will broadly categorize strategic sectors and the others. And the strategic sectors in which the PSE, public sector enterprises, will be present will be notified. In those notified sectors where PSV, public sector enterprises will be present, at least one public sector enterprise will be present. In those sectors which get notified as where you'll find the public sector enterprises, at least one public sector enterprise will be present. whilst private will also be allowed to play their role in it. However, in those sectors which get notified as strategic sectors in which public sector enterprises will be present, only 1, 2, 3 or 4 public sector enterprises will be present. In the sense, not more than 4 public sector enterprises will be there in that strategic sector notified for the presence of public sector enterprises. So if a sector is notified, and in that if there are 10 public sector enterprises, either they will be merged together or they will be brought together in such a way that they are only 4 or lesser. So there won't be mushrooming public sector enterprises in those notified strategic sectors. So in the notified strategic sectors, definitely public sector undertakings or enterprises will be present, but private sector will also come in. But imagine a particular sector which is notified as strategic. If there are too many public sector enterprises, they will either be brought together to form bigger public sector enterprises, and in that process we will not have more than 4 of them. They can be lesser than 4, but not beyond 4 public sector enterprises in those notified strategic area. Private sector can slowly come in and be present and compete in every sector, but the detailed policy will soon be opened up and issued. I move to the last of the steps today before we go to talking about other matters. Supporting state governments. The support which is already extended to the state governments in the recent past in the context of the COVID lockdown. We completely recognize that, like the center, states are also facing a sharp decline in their revenues. Despite all this, we have consistently extended the support which is needed to be extended to the states, particularly because they are at the front end of fighting the COVID pandemic. Taxation devolution, if everything had been normal, as per the budget estimates, what had to be devolved to the states, we have devolved. 46,038 crores was devolved in April, which is based on the calculation provided in the budget, based on the BE, and that devolution happened as though everything is normal, as was presented in the budget. But of course, after budget, things did change because of the pandemic. But 46,038 crores has been devolved based on the budgetary estimates. Next, revenue deficit grants to the states, 12,390 crores, was given on time. We have not, because our revenues or, there are difficulties, we have not held back. And it's our duty. I'm not saying we have done a favor. It's our duty. We have given it. Revenue deficit grants to the states of 12,390 crores was given on time in April and May, despite centers' stressed resources. What normally gets devolved over a couple of months, the SDRF, State Disaster Relief Fund, in advance was released, keeping in mind that there is a pandemic which the states are fighting, and this release happened even in the first week of April. First week of April, which is the beginning of the financial year, 11,092 crores was released, which is the SDRF fund, which normally would have got released as and when there is a situation. Health Ministry has separately from its side released 4,113 crores so that anti-COVID activities can be funded. So that's also happened. And on center's request, and I say this way because together with the secretaries, we had a video conference with the RBI, and during that RBI video conference, we had requested the RBI, which of course is their business and their terrain, but we did request, and I'm grateful that the governor and his team of officers had very readily agreed the ways and means advance limits to states has increased by 60%. Oh, increased to? By 60%. So RBI, I'm happy to say, RBI in a very timely step has increased ways and means advance limits for the states by 60%. RBI also increased the number of days states can be in continuous overdraft position from 14 days, which is normal, to 21 days. So the continuous overdraft they can remain now, not just for a fortnight, but 3 weeks. Also the number of days, the overdraft facility that they can have, number of days that a state can be in an overdraft situation in a quarter has been raised from 32 to 50 days. So nearly more than half the time, even if you're in overdraft position, Reserve Bank is okay with it. So these things had happened, and I wanted to say this is the support which we've already, because we understand states are the ones who are fighting at the forefront in containing COVID. We have not in any way hesitated to do what we are expected to do, although even we are under stress. We move to the next. Continuing with the supporting state governments. States have a net borrowing ceiling which is about 6.41 lakh crores based on a 3% of GSDP. They can borrow up to 3% of their state's gross domestic product. 75% of was authorized already by us. You can go ahead borrowing that 3% amount. Today, I'm just stating a matter of fact. States have only so far borrowed only 14% of that limit which is authorized for them. They can always in the first half of the year borrow 50%. But we said you go ahead borrowing further for the first half, 75% also you borrow right at the beginning. But I'm just stating a matter of fact position that states have so far borrowed only 14% of the limit which is authorized to them.
तो वित्त मंत्री की प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस आप सुन रहे हैं। आज 5वीं